The city lights blurred against the taxi window as Maya leaned her head to the side, exhaustion pulling at her eyes. She had been planning this trip for weeks, hoping everything would run smoothly, but fate had a strange way of turning order into chaos. When she finally reached the hotel lobby, her chest sank at the news. The system had double booked, and there were no single rooms left. The receptionist's polite smile didn't make it any easier when he said she would have to share. "With whom?" she asked, her voice caught between irritation and disbelief. And that's when a tall woman with dark hair tied loosely in a bun walked up, rolling her suitcase with ease, her expression calm but her eyes sharp. "I guess you're my roommate," she said, her tone carrying confidence that made Maya's nerves prickle. Her name was Elena. Just Elena, no explanations, no effort to soften the awkwardness. Maya wanted to protest, to demand another room, but she was too tired, and honestly, she didn't want to cause a scene. She followed Elena into the elevator, the silence between them so heavy it filled the air with tension neither dared to break. When they unlocked the door, the room revealed its cruel trick. One large bed placed neatly in the center. Maya froze. Elena chuckled, shaking her head with disbelief, then tossed her bag down on one side of the bed. "Well, I don't snore," she said casually, as if sharing a bed with a stranger was nothing. Maya's cheeks warmed, her heart thumping harder than it should. She tried to laugh, but it came out weak, almost nervous. She placed her bag carefully on the floor, too self-conscious to make herself at home. The room smelled faintly of lavender air freshener, and the hum of the air conditioner was the only sound as both women quietly unpacked, avoiding eye contact yet stealing glances when they thought the other wasn't looking. Maya changed quickly in the bathroom, staring at her reflection longer than usual. She asked herself why she felt this strange nervousness, why her palms were damp, why her chest felt so restless. It was just a room, just one night, just another woman. But when she walked out, Elena was sitting on the bed with her hair down now, scrolling through her phone, looking impossibly comfortable. Maya climbed onto her side carefully, lying stiffly as if keeping invisible boundaries. She pulled the blanket to her chin and faced away, but her mind wouldn't quiet. She could feel Elena's presence, the shift of the mattress when she moved, the sound of her breathing, steady and calm. Minutes passed like hours, the silence pressing down until Elena finally spoke. "You're awfully quiet," she said softly. Maya hesitated. "I'm just tired." Elena chuckled under her breath. "Or maybe you're just not used to this." The way she said it made Maya's chest tighten, not with annoyance, but with something deeper, something unspoken. She wanted to reply, to defend herself, but instead, she found herself asking, "And you are?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. Elena turned her head, her eyes catching the faint glow from the streetlights seeping through the curtains. "I've shared worse than a bed with a stranger," she answered calmly, as if that explained everything. The room felt smaller as the night stretched on. Maya tried to focus on sleep, but her mind kept racing, drawn back to the woman lying inches away from her. She could smell the faint trace of Elena's perfume, could hear the little sigh she made before adjusting her pillow. She tried not to notice, but her heart betrayed her with every uneven beat. It wasn't attraction she wanted to admit, not yet. It was the curiosity, the pull of someone so different from her, someone who seemed unafraid of life in the way she always had been. And as she finally closed her eyes, she felt a strange mix of fear and excitement, as though this unexpected night had opened a door she hadn't realized existed inside her. The first night had ended with more silence than sleep. Maya woke up before the alarm, her eyes opening to the faint gray light that filtered through the curtains. She turned carefully, afraid of disturbing the stillness, and found Elena asleep on her side of the bed. Her hair was messy now, strands falling across her cheek, her lips parted slightly as she breathed evenly. Something about seeing her in that state, stripped of her boldness, made Maya's chest ache. She forced herself to look away, rolling to her back and staring at the ceiling until Elena stirred. When their eyes met, it was brief, almost stolen, before Elena stretched and mumbled a good morning that carried the same casual confidence as before. Maya replied softly, her voice caught in her throat, unsure why something so ordinary felt heavy with meaning. The day moved quickly, filled with conference sessions, introductions, and polite conversations with strangers, yet Maya's mind kept drifting back to the room upstairs. To the bed waiting. To Elena. By the time evening came, Maya felt restless, carrying the weight of questions she didn't dare ask herself. When they returned to the room, both women seemed quieter than the night before, their words fewer, their movements slower. Maya changed into her sleep clothes again, folding her blouse too carefully, while Elena carelessly dropped her jacket on the chair and flopped onto the bed. The space between them hummed with something unspoken, a pull neither wanted to name. As they lay side by side again, Maya tried to distract herself by scrolling on her phone, but every time Elena shifted, her body grew tense. Finally, Elena broke the silence, her voice low and thoughtful. "Do you ever feel like you're living someone else's life?" Maya froze. The question was too close, too raw, like it was meant for her soul, not her ears. She swallowed and nodded faintly, though Elena couldn't see it in the dark. "All the time," she whispered, surprising herself with her honesty. Elena turned slightly, her voice softer now. "You strike me as the type who hides more than she shows." Maya's chest tightened at the words, because they weren't cruel, they were true. She wanted to respond, to argue, but instead she let the silence stretch before finally admitting, "I don't know how to show what's inside. It's easier to pretend I'm fine." Elena let out a long breath, the kind that sounded like someone carrying their own unspoken weight. "Pretending works for a while," she said, her tone tinged with memory. "But it eats you alive eventually." Her words sank into Maya's chest like stones, heavy but strangely freeing. For the first time, she felt like someone saw through the walls she had carefully built. Their conversation deepened in the quiet, voices hushed but words heavy. Maya spoke about her small town, her family's expectations, the way she had always walked carefully, never too bold, never too honest. Elena listened without judgment, occasionally nodding, her presence more comforting than Maya expected. When Elena spoke about her own past, it was with an openness Maya envied. She described falling in love young, being rejected, picking herself back up, and finally deciding never to apologize for who she was. There was laughter, too, small moments where they teased each other, where Maya forgot to guard her smile. Elena had a way of turning pain into humor, of making heavy truths feel like stories worth surviving. At one point, when their hands brushed under the blanket, neither pulled away. The contact was brief, almost accidental, but it left a spark that burned long after. Maya's pulse raced, her breath shallow, but she didn't move. For the first time, she wasn't scared of being noticed. She wanted it. She wanted to be seen, fully and without apology. The hours stretched on, their voices softening, their words turning into secrets shared only in the safety of the dark. When silence finally returned, it wasn't empty anymore. It was full, of trust, of longing, of something Maya couldn't yet name. She turned slightly, her eyes tracing the faint outline of Elena's profile against the glow of the streetlights. She wondered if Elena could hear her heartbeat, if she knew the effect she had without even trying. Maya closed her eyes, her lips curved in a faint, almost hidden smile, as though her world had quietly shifted without asking her permission. The second day passed in a blur for Maya. The meetings, the handshakes, the polite exchanges with strangers, all of it felt distant, like her body was present but her mind was anchored somewhere else. Every time she caught herself thinking of the room upstairs, of the warmth of last night's conversation, her chest tightened in a way she couldn't explain. She told herself it was silly, that it was nothing more than circumstance, two strangers thrown together by a mistake, but the thought didn't stop following her. By the time evening crept in, she felt drained, the weight of the day pressing down on her shoulders as she pushed open the door to the room. Elena was already there, sitting cross-legged on the bed in an oversized t-shirt, flipping through a notebook, her hair falling loose around her face. She looked up when Maya walked in and smirked, a little crooked smile that carried its own kind of confidence. "You look like you've run a marathon," she said, her tone light. Maya managed a weak laugh as she placed her bag on the desk, rubbing the tension out of her neck. For a while, they both stayed quiet, each lost in their own rhythm. Maya changed into something comfortable, taking her time in the bathroom, staring at her reflection again like she always did. She didn't recognize the face staring back anymore, not because it was different, but because it was starting to feel exposed. When she stepped out, Elena had pushed her notebook aside and was leaning back against the pillows, watching her with a calmness that unsettled Maya more than she wanted to admit. "You're so careful," Elena said suddenly. "Everything you do feels like you're walking on glass." The words hit harder than expected. Maya wanted to defend herself, to shrug it off, but the truth in Elena's voice left her bare. "Maybe I don't know how to be any other way," she admitted softly. Elena tilted her head, studying her, and then let out a quiet laugh. She sat forward, her movements unhurried, and before Maya could process what was happening, Elena reached out and touched her shoulder lightly. "You're tense," she said, her voice dropping to something softer. "Like you've been holding your breath all day." Maya froze, her heart pounding in her ears. She wanted to step back, but she didn't. Instead, she stood still as Elena's fingers brushed against the buttons of her shirt, lingering for only a second before working one open. "Relax," Elena whispered, unbuttoning another slowly, as though testing the air, watching for resistance. Maya's throat tightened, her breath uneven, but her feet remained planted to the floor. It wasn't the gesture itself that shook her, it was the tenderness behind it. There was no rush, no hunger, no pressure. Elena wasn't trying to claim or take, she was offering something Maya hadn't felt in years, permission to let go. With every button undone, Maya's chest felt lighter, her heartbeat racing but steadying at the same time. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, feeling the soft air against her skin, the way Elena's touch was careful, almost protective. When she opened them again, Elena was watching her, her expression unreadable but her gaze steady. The silence between them grew dense, heavy with something unspoken, but Maya didn't turn away. Her lips parted, as though words were forming, but nothing came out. She didn't know what to say, didn't know how to name what was happening. Instead, she sank slowly onto the bed, sitting beside Elena, her hands trembling just enough to betray her. Elena leaned back, giving her space, not pressing further, only saying quietly, "See? You don't always have to carry it all." The words wrapped around Maya like a blanket, sinking deep into the parts of her she usually kept hidden. For the first time in a long time, she felt both exposed and safe, stripped of her walls yet not judged for it. The night unfolded in quiet simplicity after that. They didn't speak much, but they didn't need to. Elena leaned back against the pillows again, her body close enough for warmth but far enough to honor the space Maya wasn't ready to cross. Maya lay down slowly, her shirt loose now, the air cool against her skin, but instead of shame, there was a strange calm in her chest. She stared at the ceiling, aware of every breath, every heartbeat, every subtle shift of the mattress beside her. The world outside the window moved on, cars passing, people laughing in the distance, but inside that room, time felt slower, more fragile, more alive. And as her eyes finally grew heavy, Maya realized she wasn't scared of the silence anymore. It wasn't emptiness. It was possibility. The second day passed in a blur for Maya. The meetings, the handshakes, the polite exchanges with strangers, all of it felt distant, like her body was present but her mind was anchored somewhere else. Every time she caught herself thinking of the room upstairs, of the warmth of last night's conversation, her chest tightened in a way she couldn't explain. She told herself it was silly, that it was nothing more than circumstance, two strangers thrown together by a mistake, but the thought didn't stop following her. By the time evening crept in, she felt drained, the weight of the day pressing down on her shoulders as she pushed open the door to the room. Elena was already there, sitting cross-legged on the bed in an oversized t-shirt, flipping through a notebook, her hair falling loose around her face. She looked up when Maya walked in and smirked, a little crooked smile that carried its own kind of confidence. "You look like you've run a marathon," she said, her tone light. Maya managed a weak laugh as she placed her bag on the desk, rubbing the tension out of her neck. For a while, they both stayed quiet, each lost in their own rhythm. Maya changed into something comfortable, taking her time in the bathroom, staring at her reflection again like she always did. She didn't recognize the face staring back anymore, not because it was different, but because it was starting to feel exposed. When she stepped out, Elena had pushed her notebook aside and was leaning back against the pillows, watching her with a calmness that unsettled Maya more than she wanted to admit. "You're so careful," Elena said suddenly. "Everything you do feels like you're walking on glass." The words hit harder than expected. Maya wanted to defend herself, to shrug it off, but the truth in Elena's voice left her bare. "Maybe I don't know how to be any other way," she admitted softly. Elena tilted her head, studying her, and then let out a quiet laugh. She sat forward, her movements unhurried, and before Maya could process what was happening, Elena reached out and touched her shoulder lightly. "You're tense," she said, her voice dropping to something softer. "Like you've been holding your breath all day." Maya froze, her heart pounding in her ears. She wanted to step back, but she didn't. Instead, she stood still as Elena's fingers brushed against the buttons of her shirt, lingering for only a second before working one open. "Relax," Elena whispered, unbuttoning another slowly, as though testing the air, watching for resistance. Maya's throat tightened, her breath uneven, but her feet remained planted to the floor. It wasn't the gesture itself that shook her, it was the tenderness behind it. There was no rush, no hunger, no pressure. Elena wasn't trying to claim or take, she was offering something Maya hadn't felt in years, permission to let go. With every button undone, Maya's chest felt lighter, her heartbeat racing but steadying at the same time. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, feeling the soft air against her skin, the way Elena's touch was careful, almost protective. When she opened them again, Elena was watching her, her expression unreadable but her gaze steady. The silence between them grew dense, heavy with something unspoken, but Maya didn't turn away. Her lips parted, as though words were forming, but nothing came out. She didn't know what to say, didn't know how to name what was happening. Instead, she sank slowly onto the bed, sitting beside Elena, her hands trembling just enough to betray her. Elena leaned back, giving her space, not pressing further, only saying quietly, "See? You don't always have to carry it all." The words wrapped around Maya like a blanket, sinking deep into the parts of her she usually kept hidden. For the first time in a long time, she felt both exposed and safe, stripped of her walls yet not judged for it. The night unfolded in quiet simplicity after that. They didn't speak much, but they didn't need to. Elena leaned back against the pillows again, her body close enough for warmth but far enough to honor the space Maya wasn't ready to cross. Maya lay down slowly, her shirt loose now, the air cool against her skin, but instead of shame, there was a strange calm in her chest. She stared at the ceiling, aware of every breath, every heartbeat, every subtle shift of the mattress beside her. The world outside the window moved on, cars passing, people laughing in the distance, but inside that room, time felt slower, more fragile, more alive. And as her eyes finally grew heavy, Maya realized she wasn't scared of the silence anymore. It wasn't emptiness. It was possibility. The room was dark, the only light spilling faintly from the street lamps outside, painting thin golden lines across the floor. Maya lay on her back, her shirt loose against her skin where Elena's fingers had left it unbuttoned earlier, and her chest rose and fell with shallow breaths she tried to quiet. The silence was louder tonight, not empty but full, pressing against her ears like a truth waiting to be spoken. She turned slightly, her eyes adjusting enough to trace the outline of Elena beside her, her hair spread across the pillow, her body relaxed in a way that looked effortless. Maya wanted to look away, but she couldn't. Something inside her had shifted, and the weight of it pressed against her ribs until she felt she might burst. Her voice broke the stillness before she could stop it, soft and trembling. "I've never told anyone this." The words hung in the air, uncertain, fragile. Elena stirred, opening her eyes slowly, her gaze catching Maya's. She didn't rush her, didn't interrupt, just gave a faint nod, the kind that said she was listening, fully and without judgment. Maya swallowed hard, her hands gripping the edge of the blanket. "I've always known," she whispered, her throat tightening. "But I couldn't say it. Not to my family, not to my friends. I've always been afraid. Afraid of losing them. Afraid of being wrong. Afraid of being me." The last word cracked in her throat, her voice breaking under the weight of all the years she had buried it. For a moment, Elena said nothing, and the silence stretched, making Maya's heart pound in panic. Then Elena reached out slowly, placing her hand over Maya's trembling one. The warmth of her touch was grounding, steady, like a rope keeping her from drifting too far. "Fear doesn't mean you're broken," Elena said quietly, her voice low and certain. "It means you've been surviving. And surviving isn't the same as living." The words hit Maya with a force that made her eyes sting. She turned her face away quickly, but the tears slipped out anyway, rolling hot down her cheeks. She tried to apologize, tried to hide it, but Elena's hand squeezed hers gently. "Don't," she whispered. "Don't hide from me." That simple plea broke something in her. Maya turned back, her eyes wet, her chest aching, and found Elena's gaze steady and soft, full of an understanding she had never seen in anyone else. The dam inside her cracked wide open. She confessed everything in a rush, the confusion, the denial, the nights she lay awake wondering what was wrong with her, the way she forced herself into boxes that never fit. Her words tumbled out like waves crashing, raw and desperate, and still Elena listened without flinching. When she finished, her throat was raw, her body shaking, and she felt exposed in a way that terrified her. Elena shifted closer, lifting her hand to brush a strand of hair away from Maya's damp cheek. Her fingers lingered gently against her skin, wiping away a tear with her thumb. "I know," she said softly. "I know what it feels like to hide so deep you forget who you are. I've been there. I've lost people because of it. But I've also learned something. When you finally stop running, when you stop apologizing, you find the ones who see you and stay anyway. That's when you start to breathe for the first time." Her voice was steady, but her eyes glistened faintly, revealing her own scars hidden behind strength. Maya's breath hitched as Elena leaned forward, not too close, not pushing, just enough that their foreheads almost touched. The intimacy wasn't in the distance closed but in the way Elena held the moment, giving Maya the choice, the control she had never felt she deserved. For a heartbeat, Maya froze, her chest tight with fear. Then, almost instinctively, she moved that last inch, resting her forehead against Elena's. It was such a small gesture, yet it felt monumental, like the earth had shifted under her. Her tears slowed, her breath steadied, and for the first time, she didn't feel broken. She felt seen. Neither of them moved for a long while. They lay there, sharing the quiet, their hands still tangled under the blanket, their breaths mingling in the soft dark. When Maya finally spoke again, her voice was softer but steadier. "I don't want to be afraid anymore." Elena's thumb brushed gently across her knuckles. "Then don't," she said simply. "Fear doesn't disappear overnight. But every time you choose yourself, every time you let yourself feel instead of hide, you take a piece of its power away. One day, there won't be any left." Maya let those words sink deep, clinging to them like a lifeline. She closed her eyes, letting the warmth of Elena's presence wrap around her, and for the first time in years, she felt a strange kind of peace. Not because everything was solved, not because the fear was gone, but because someone finally understood. And as she drifted toward sleep, still holding Elena's hand, she realized she wasn't just surviving anymore. She was beginning to live. Morning came too quickly, the kind of morning where the sun forced its way through the thin hotel curtains and painted lines across the bed. Maya woke up with Elena's hand still loosely tangled with hers under the blanket. For a second, she didn't move, just let herself feel the simple weight of that touch. It was grounding, steady, like an anchor holding her to a place she wasn't ready to let go of. But then reality crept back in, the conference schedule, the people downstairs who had no idea what was happening in this quiet room, and the questions pressing against her ribs that she still didn't know how to answer. She pulled her hand back slowly, careful not to wake Elena, and slipped out of bed. By the time she was dressed, her chest already felt hollow, as if leaving that cocoon of warmth had stolen something she wasn't ready to lose. The day was long, painfully long. She sat through panels and lectures, surrounded by people who spoke confidently, shaking hands, exchanging business cards, talking about futures as if they were certain of everything. Maya smiled when she had to, nodded when it was expected, but inside her mind kept wandering back to the night before, the tears, the confessions, the way Elena had listened without judgment. She kept hearing Elena's words, "When you stop apologizing, you start to breathe," and the truth of them pressed on her chest until she thought she might burst. Still, she said nothing. She didn't send a message upstairs. She didn't look for Elena in the crowd. She just carried it inside her like a secret burning too hot to contain. When she finally returned to the room, her stomach twisted with nerves. Elena was already there, sitting at the desk with her laptop open, her face lit by the glow of the screen. She looked up briefly when Maya walked in, her expression unreadable, then turned back to her work. Maya placed her bag down carefully, the silence between them thicker than it had ever been. She wanted to speak, to say something, but the words refused to form. Instead, she busied herself with small, unnecessary tasks, folding her jacket, rearranging her toiletries, pretending she didn't notice the quiet. But she did. She felt every second of it. The evening dragged on, heavy and uncomfortable. Maya sat on her side of the bed, scrolling through her phone though she wasn't reading a single word. Elena closed her laptop eventually and leaned back in the chair, crossing her arms. She looked tired, but not the same kind of tired Maya felt. Her exhaustion seemed heavier, more deliberate, like she was holding something back. The distance between them was unbearable, yet neither seemed willing to close it. When they finally slipped into bed, the silence followed. They lay side by side, the inches between their bodies feeling wider than the whole world. Maya's thoughts spun endlessly. She kept replaying the night before, the way Elena had brushed the tears from her face, the way their foreheads had touched, the promise of something fragile and real. But now? Now it felt like she had imagined it, like it had slipped away with the morning sun. Her chest tightened painfully, and she turned on her side, facing away, trying to breathe quietly so Elena wouldn't hear the ache in it. She wanted to ask, "Do you regret last night? Do you wish it hadn't happened? Do you feel what I feel?" But fear swallowed the words before they could leave her lips. Behind her, Elena shifted slightly, the mattress dipping with her weight. The sound made Maya's heart race, but no words followed, only more silence. That silence became unbearable, so sharp it stung. Finally, in the darkness, Maya whispered, barely audible, "I don't know what this means." The words slipped out before she could stop them, carried by the weight in her chest. For a moment, there was nothing, and she wished she could take them back. But then Elena's voice came, quiet, almost fragile. "I didn't want to push you." Her tone was different tonight, less confident, more vulnerable, and it startled Maya. She turned slightly, her breath catching as she processed the words. Elena sighed softly. You're figuring yourself out. I didn't want to be the reason you felt forced into something you weren't ready for. Maya's throat tightened, tears pricking her eyes again. She realized she had mistaken Elena's distance for indifference, when in reality it was patience, a kind of care she wasn't used to. She swallowed hard, her voice breaking as she whispered, I thought maybe you regretted it. The bed shifted as Elena turned toward her, and then she felt it, a hand brushing lightly against her arm, tentative but certain enough to be real. Not for a second, Elena said, her voice steady now. But I wanted you to be sure. Maya couldn't hold back the tears then. They slipped down her cheeks silently, hot and unrelenting, but this time she didn't hide them. She turned fully, finding Elena's eyes in the dark, and the sight of them, soft, searching, unafraid, broke the last piece of fear clinging to her. She pressed her forehead to Elena's again, the same way they had the night before, but this time it wasn't tentative. It was choice. It was trust. Her voice shook as she whispered, I've never felt like this before. Elena's hand slid gently down her arm, finding her fingers and weaving them together. That's because you've never let yourself, she replied. The silence that followed wasn't heavy anymore. It was warm, filled with the pulse of something fragile but alive. They didn't need more words that night. The truth was already between them, strong enough to keep them awake long after the city outside had gone quiet, strong enough to make Maya believe that maybe, for the first time in her life, she was exactly where she was meant to be. The night after their fragile honesty hung between them like a thread stretched too thin, Maya couldn't close her eyes. She lay in the dark, her chest rising and falling too quickly, her hand still wrapped in Elena's as if letting go would break everything that had just been spoken. Her thoughts circled endlessly, questions upon questions. Was she ready for this? Could she handle what it meant? All her life she had avoided moments like this, kept her heart under lock and key, afraid of what people would say, afraid of what she herself might admit if she stopped running. But here, in this small hotel room, there was nowhere left to run. Elena was too close, too real, and the emotions pressing against Maya's ribs were too strong to pretend away. She squeezed Elena's hand tighter, afraid of the silence swallowing her, and whispered into the dark, I don't want to be scared anymore. Elena shifted beside her, rolling closer until the warmth of her body seeped through the thin space between them. She didn't rush. She didn't press. Her voice came steady but gentle, carrying the weight of someone who had walked through storms of her own. You don't have to be fearless all at once, she said. You just have to be honest with yourself. That's the first step. Maya turned her head, finding Elena's eyes even in the dim light. She wanted to say more, wanted to confess the way her heart beat harder every time Elena looked at her, the way she felt both terrified and alive in her presence. Instead, all she managed was a shaky, I don't know how to do this. Elena's lips curved into a faint smile, the kind that wasn't mocking but soft, understanding. You don't have to know. You just have to feel. The words settled into the air like a secret meant only for them. Elena lifted her free hand and brushed the hair gently from Maya's face, her touch slow, deliberate, asking permission with every movement. Maya didn't flinch this time. She let the touch linger, let it trace the line of her cheek, the corner of her jaw. Her breath caught in her throat, her chest rising sharply, but she didn't turn away. For the first time, she leaned into it, closing the space between them not with words but with a trembling kind of courage. Their lips met softly, tentatively, like a question neither was certain how to answer. It wasn't rushed, it wasn't hungry, it was gentle, steady, a kiss filled more with promise than desire. Maya's eyes fluttered shut, and for a brief moment the fear inside her quieted. All she felt was warmth, safety, and the terrifying relief of being seen. When they pulled apart, the silence that followed was heavier than any words they could have spoken. Maya's heart raced, pounding so loud she thought Elena must hear it. She searched Elena's face for signs of doubt, for regret, but instead found calm, steady eyes watching her with patience. "You don't have to be perfect at this," Elena said softly. "You just have to be you. That's enough." The simplicity of it struck Maya harder than anything else. For years she had been chasing perfection, chasing safety, hiding the parts of herself that didn't fit the mold. But Elena didn't want perfection. She just wanted her. They stayed like that for what felt like hours, hands tangled, bodies close but not hurried. The quiet was no longer a wall but a shelter, wrapping them in something fragile yet unbreakable. Eventually, Maya whispered, almost too softly to be heard, "I've been waiting for someone to tell me it's okay to be this way." Elena tilted her head, brushing her thumb over the back of Maya's hand. "You don't need anyone's permission. You've been okay all along. You just needed to believe it." Maya's chest tightened at the words, tears prickling her eyes again, but this time they weren't from pain. They were from relief. The night blurred into hours of whispered confessions and soft touches, both of them learning the shape of the space they shared, both careful not to push too far. Maya spoke about the years of silence, the friendships she'd kept shallow to avoid questions, the relationships she'd never dared to explore. Elena listened, patient and open, occasionally offering pieces of her own story in return, the rejection she had endured, the loneliness, the way she had clawed her way toward acceptance even when it hurt. Their stories braided together in the quiet, weaving something stronger than either had carried alone. When sleep finally came, it was not out of exhaustion but out of peace. Maya drifted off with her head resting lightly against Elena's shoulder, her hand still clinging to hers. For the first time in as long as she could remember, she didn't dream of running or hiding. She dreamed of stillness, of warmth, of being seen. And when morning light slipped back through the curtains, she didn't wake with panic. She woke with a fragile, trembling hope that maybe this wasn't just a fleeting moment. Maybe it was the beginning of something real. The first light of morning slipped through the curtains, soft and golden, spilling across the bed where Maya and Elena lay tangled in quiet closeness. Maya's eyes blinked open slowly, her body heavy with sleep but her mind stirring with thoughts that came too quickly. For a moment, she didn't move. She just listened, to the steady rhythm of Elena's breathing, to the faint hum of the city outside, to the pounding of her own heart that seemed louder than anything else. Her cheek rested against Elena's shoulder, and the warmth of that simple touch filled her chest in ways she had never known possible. But with the warmth came fear, curling at the edges of her thoughts like smoke. What happened now? What did this mean outside the safe cocoon of this hotel room? She shifted slightly, careful not to wake Elena, and stared up at the ceiling. The night before had changed everything. She could still feel the ghost of Elena's kiss on her lips, the softness of her words, the safety of her arms. It had been tender, real, more than anything she had dared to imagine. But now, in the daylight, it all felt fragile. Would Elena still feel the same? Would Maya still be brave enough to admit it was real? She turned her head and looked at her. Elena's face was relaxed in sleep, her features softer without the weight of her usual confidence. Stray strands of hair had fallen across her cheek, and Maya had the sudden, aching urge to brush them away, to memorize her just like this. Her fingers twitched with the thought, but she stopped herself, afraid of crossing a line she wasn't sure she was allowed to cross. When Elena finally stirred awake, she stretched with a soft sigh and blinked at Maya, her lips curving into a faint smile that carried no hesitation. "Morning," she murmured, her voice husky with sleep. The simple word made Maya's chest tighten, as if all the fear inside her had been waiting to be undone by something so ordinary. She managed a quiet morning in return, though her voice was fragile. Elena studied her for a moment, her eyes gentle but sharp enough to see through the mask Maya tried to hold. "You're overthinking," she said softly, as if she could read the storm inside her. Maya flushed, looking away, but Elena reached out and caught her chin with the lightest touch, turning her face back. "Don't run away from this," she whispered. Not from me. Not from yourself. Maya's throat tightened. She wanted to believe she could stay in this moment forever, but doubt still clung to her. It's different when the sun is up, she admitted. Last night felt like a dream. What if I wake up and it's all gone? Elena's expression softened even further. She moved closer, brushing her thumb across the back of Maya's hand. Dreams fade. This doesn't. What you felt last night? What I felt? That doesn't disappear with daylight. The words unraveled something inside Maya, loosening the knot of fear that had tightened again with the morning. She let out a shaky breath and leaned into Elena's touch, her forehead resting briefly against her hand. I don't want to lose this, she confessed. Elena's smile deepened, quiet but certain. Then don't. It's not something you can lose overnight. It's something you choose, every day, no matter how hard it feels. The simplicity of it was startling. Maya had spent her whole life believing love was something fragile, something conditional, something that could be taken away at the first sign of truth. But Elena spoke as if it was a decision, as if holding on could be as steady as breathing. The day moved slowly after that, filled with stolen glances and quiet moments that spoke louder than words. They ate breakfast together in the corner of the hotel cafe, their knees brushing under the table, neither pulling away. They walked side by side through the conference halls, not touching but close enough that their presence was undeniable, the air between them charged with something unspoken. Every time Maya caught Elena's eyes across the room, a rush of warmth flooded her chest, a reminder that she wasn't alone anymore, not in the way that mattered. That night, when they returned to their room, the silence was different again. It wasn't awkward. It wasn't heavy with doubt. It was full, charged, like a pause before something inevitable. Maya sat on the edge of the bed, her hands twisting in her lap, while Elena watched her from the other side. Finally, Maya broke the quiet. I'm scared of what happens when we leave this place, she admitted. Her voice trembled, and her eyes burned with unshed tears. What if this is just temporary? What if I'm not strong enough outside these walls? Elena crossed the space slowly, kneeling in front of her so their eyes met at the same level. Her hands rested gently on Maya's knees, steadying her. You don't have to have it all figured out right now, she said. What matters is how you feel, right here, right now. The rest we can face together. You don't have to do it alone anymore. Maya's chest tightened with emotion, the tears finally spilling over. She reached forward, trembling, and wrapped her arms around Elena's shoulders, holding on as if she might drown without her. Elena held her just as tightly, her hand rubbing slow circles on her back. You're stronger than you think, she whispered against her hair. And I'll remind you every day until you believe it. When they finally pulled apart, their faces were inches apart, their breaths mingling in the quiet. This time, when their lips met, it wasn't tentative. It wasn't a question. It was an answer, soft but certain, a seal on a promise they hadn't yet spoken aloud but both felt deep in their bones. Maya's fear didn't vanish, but it shifted, becoming smaller in the face of something stronger. For the first time in her life, she let herself lean fully into the feeling, into the safety of arms that asked for nothing but truth. And as the night stretched on, she realized she wasn't just finding Elena. She was finally finding herself. The last morning together came too quickly, the kind of morning that carried both sweetness and a sting. Maya woke before Elena this time, her eyes opening slowly to the pale light filtering in through the curtains. For a long while, she didn't move. She just lay there, watching the rise and fall of Elena's chest, memorizing the way her lips curved slightly even in sleep, how peaceful she looked in a world that had rarely given her peace. Maya wanted to stop time right then, to hold this fragile moment in her hands and never let it slip. But reality hummed faintly in the background, reminding her that outside these walls, life was waiting, and life was rarely kind. She shifted closer, careful not to wake Elena yet, and pressed her forehead lightly against her shoulder, breathing in the warmth that smelled faintly of comfort and safety. The thought of leaving it behind sent a dull ache through her chest. When Elena finally stirred, she turned and found Maya already awake, her dark eyes heavy with thoughts. "You've been up a while," she said softly, her voice rough with sleep. Maya tried to smile but it faltered. "I didn't want this to end," she admitted, her voice trembling. Elena reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, her touch steady. "It doesn't have to end," she said. "Not here. Not now. Not ever, unless you choose to walk away." The certainty in her voice soothed some of Maya's panic, but fear still curled at the edges. "What if I can't be brave enough out there?" she whispered. "It feels so easy when it's just us. But when it's everyone else, when it's the world, I don't know if I'll be enough." Elena didn't flinch, didn't let go. She leaned closer, her forehead pressing against Maya's, her words low but fierce. "Then lean on me until you find your strength. That's what love is. It's not about being fearless alone, it's about being scared together and still choosing each other." The truth of those words hit Maya deep, unraveling the wall she had been holding on to for years. Tears slipped down her cheeks, and Elena brushed them away with her thumb, not judging, not rushing, just letting her feel. Maya realized then that maybe bravery wasn't about standing tall all the time, it was about letting someone in when you wanted to hide. And in that quiet room, wrapped in Elena's arms, she understood that she didn't have to face the world in one leap. She could do it step by step. As long as Elena was beside her, they spent the last hours together with a tenderness that was almost sacred. There was no need for grand declarations or rushed promises. It was in the way they lingered over breakfast, Maya laughing shyly when Elena teased her about how much sugar she put in her coffee. It was in the way Elena reached for her hand in the hallway, their fingers brushing until they finally laced together, not caring if anyone noticed. It was in the silence of their walks, when words weren't needed because the closeness spoke louder. Every moment was layered with the knowledge that soon they would have to step out of the bubble they had built, but neither of them let that knowledge steal the present. When the time finally came to leave the hotel, Maya froze at the doorway, her bag slung over her shoulder, her eyes glued to the floor. The weight of fear pressed down again, heavier now that the safety of four walls was falling away. Elena noticed, as she always did, and gently took her hand. "Look at me," she said softly. Maya lifted her eyes, and Elena's gaze held her steady. "You don't have to go back to being who you were before. You get to choose who you are now. And I'll be here. Maybe not in this room, but in your life, if you'll let me." The choice was there, hanging between them. And for the first time, Maya didn't feel like she was standing on the edge of a cliff alone. She felt like she had wings, not because she had grown them herself, but because Elena was holding her hand and refusing to let go. As they stepped outside, the world looked different, brighter, louder, more daunting, but Maya found herself standing a little taller, walking a little steadier. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but she knew this: she wasn't hiding anymore. She wasn't burying the truth of who she was, not when she had finally touched something real, something worth fighting for. As Elena walked beside her, their shoulders brushing, Maya felt a swell of quiet determination rise in her chest. She could face the whispers, the stares, the doubts, because for the first time she wasn't facing them alone. And with each step forward, she realized this wasn't an ending at all. It was a beginning, the beginning of a love that had already started to heal the pieces of herself she thought were lost forever.